Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Golden Sun. Ryland Foster stared at the quarterly reports on his laptop, the numbers blurring together after 14 straight hours of work. At 36, he had built Foster Security Solutions from nothing into a regional powerhouse, providing cutting-edge cybersecurity for businesses across 3 states. The weight of his success pressed down on him like a physical burden. 200 employees relied on him for their livelihoods. His phone buzzed. A text from his wife, Melanie. "Working late again? Don't bother coming to dinner with my parents. We'll go without you." Ryland sighed. Their 10th anniversary was next week, and things had been strained lately. Melanie had grown increasingly distant over the past year, her disappointment in their marriage poorly concealed behind tight smiles and clipped conversations. Her texts had become colder, her kisses briefer. Something was slipping away, but he couldn't focus on that now. Not with the Davidson contract at stake. He texted back a quick apology and returned to work. 4 hours later, he finally drove home to their colonial-style house in Lakewood Heights. The neighborhood represented everything he'd fought to achieve: respectability, security, success. Every mortgage payment felt like a victory over his past. Growing up in a modest West Side district, Ryland had watched his parents, Russell and Beverly Foster, struggle paycheck to paycheck. His father worked double shifts at the steel mill, while his mother cleaned houses in wealthier neighborhoods. They had made it clear from an early age that educational success was his only ticket out. "You can be so much more than us," his mother would say, "but it's up to you to make it happen." When Ryland's academic abilities earned him a partial scholarship to State University, his parents couldn't cover the remaining costs. He worked 2 jobs while maintaining a 3.8 GPA, often sleeping just 4 hours a night. There were no family vacations, no car given at graduation like his classmates received. Every accomplishment was his alone. After college, while his peers leaned on family connections or parental funding to launch careers, Ryland started his security business from his cramped apartment, living on ramen and determination. His parents had visited once, looking around with uncomfortable expressions. "Nice enough," his father had said. "But temporary, right? You'll move somewhere better soon." That somewhere better had taken 8 years of relentless work to achieve. By then, he'd met Melanie Prescott, the daughter of a local bank president. Beautiful, cultured, and ambitious, she'd seen potential in the rising entrepreneur. Their courtship had been a whirlwind, culminating in a wedding grander than Ryland had ever imagined for himself. His parents had seemed proud at the wedding, though they complained about the cost afterward. "That money could have been a down payment on a better house for you," his father had noted. Now, as Ryland entered the dark house, he found a note on the kitchen counter: "Staying at my parents' tonight. Don't wait up." He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and carried it to their home office, where he began scanning through the backlog of household bills. An email notification popped up, a message from his sister Audrey. Their parents had apparently suffered a financial setback and needed help with their property taxes. Again, he'd already paid for a new roof last year and covered their medical deductible 3 months ago. Ryland transferred the money without hesitation. Family was family. They'd raised him, after all, but something bitter twisted in his gut, a feeling he quickly suppressed. The next morning, he woke early and called his wife. "I'm sorry about missing dinner," he said when she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Let me make it up to you. Anniversary week starts now. I've booked that restaurant you love for tonight." "Tonight?" Melanie paused. "I can't tonight. I have a charity committee meeting." A muffled voice spoke in the background, followed by the sound of Melanie covering the phone. When she returned, her voice was lower. "Look, I need to go. I'll see you at home later." The call ended before he could respond. Ryland stared at his phone, an uncomfortable realization forming. That hadn't sounded like her parents' guest room. Throughout the day, he found himself checking Melanie's social media. There was nothing unusual, just carefully curated images of their perfect life. A photo from 3 days ago showed them at a fundraiser, Melanie radiant in a blue dress, while Rylan stood beside her in his tailored suit. Power couple goals. Someone had commented. That evening, Melanie returned home dressed immaculately, not looking like someone who'd been at a charity meeting. How was the committee? Rylan asked casually. Fine. The usual. Lot of planning for the summer gala, she answered without meeting his eyes. I thought the summer gala committee met on Thursdays. Brittany Collins mentioned it last week. Melanie's smile froze. Different committee. Listen, I'm exhausted. I'm going to take a bath and turn early. Later that night, Rylan lay awake beside his sleeping wife, staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Your father and I need to discuss something important with you. Family meeting this Sunday. Please make time. The formality of the message was unusual, but Rylan responded affirmatively. Family always came first. That's what he'd been taught. That's what he believed. He didn't know then that his entire world was about to collapse, or that from the ashes, a different Rylan Foster would emerge. One who would make them all regret their betrayal. Chapter 2. The bill comes due. Sunday afternoon arrived with perfect weather, the kind of spring day that usually lifted Rylan's spirits. He drove to his parents' modest home with Melanie beside him, their conversation light but strained. She'd seemed reluctant to come, checking her phone repeatedly during the drive. Everything okay? He asked after her third glance at her screen. Just work emails, she replied quickly. The Preston account is a mess. Melanie had leveraged her father's connections to secure a position at Meridian Marketing 3 years ago. Lately, her work emergencies had become surprisingly frequent, especially on evenings and weekends. They arrived to find his sister Audrey's car already parked in the driveway. Audrey, for years younger than Rylan, had followed a different path. While he'd worked his way through college, their parents had somehow found the money to cover Audrey's full tuition. When she'd wanted to switch majors 3 times, extending her education by 2 years, that had been covered too. Your sister needs to find herself, their mother had explained when Rylan questioned the disparity. Not everyone is as naturally focused as you. Audrey greeted them at the door with her signature dramatic hug. Brother dearest. Finally, Mom and Dad have been acting super weird all morning. Inside, the living room had been arranged formally. The good dishes were out, and his parents sat stiffly on the sofa with an unusual air of preparation. His father's accounting ledger lay open on the coffee table. After brief greetings, Russell Foster cleared his throat. We've asked you here today to discuss an important matter. He adjusted his glasses. Your mother and I have been reviewing our finances in preparation for retirement. Beverly nodded. We've made many sacrifices over the years, particularly for our children. Something in their tone made Rylan uneasy. He'd been helping them financially for years. Was this about needing more? We've calculated exactly what we invested in raising you, Rylan, his father continued, sliding a paper across the table. This includes food, housing, clothing, educational expenses, health care, everything from birth to age 18. Rylan stared at the document in disbelief. It was an itemized bill, meticulously broken down by year, with a final figure circled at the bottom, $273,485.22. You owe us for raising you, his father said matter-of-factly. We expect repayment before we retire next year. Rylan looked from the bill to his parents' serious faces, waiting for the punchline. When none came, he laughed nervously. This is a joke, right? Do we look like we're joking? His mother replied coldly. We invested everything in you. Now it's time for return on investment. Be grateful we're only charging you this much, she added, her voice softening into something false. We didn't even add interest. Rylan's mind raced. Was this legal? Could parents bill their children for basic care? More importantly, how could they calculate the cost of what should have been unconditional love? I've been helping you financially for years, he replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. The roof, medical bills, property taxes, small contributions, his father dismissed. This is the principal amount. You're successful because of our sacrifices. It's time to repay your debt. I paid my own way through college, Rylan argued. I built my business without any family support. We gave you values and discipline, his mother countered. Those are worth more than money. Before Rylan could respond, Melanie unexpectedly spoke up. They're right, you know. You do owe them. Her tone was cool, detached. And while we're discussing debts, she pulled a folded paper from her purse. You owe me too, for marrying a loser like you. The room went silent. Even Audrey looked shocked. A loser? Rylan repeated, feeling like he'd been slapped. What are you talking about? I married you expecting a certain lifestyle, Melanie continued, pushing her own list toward him. 10 years of supporting your career, playing the perfect wife, entertaining your boring business associates. I deserve compensation for my time investment. Her list included figures for emotional labor, social networking benefits provided, and career advancement support. Rylan looked around the room, a terrible understanding dawning. You all planned this together. Audrey shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Not exactly, his father replied. But Melanie raised some valid points when we discussed our situation with her. So they had discussed this behind his back. The betrayal cut deeper than the absurdity of their demands. I see, Rylan said quietly, gathering both papers. Let me consider this. He stood and walked to his briefcase by the door. For years, he'd maintained meticulous records of every financial interaction with his family, a habit from his early days of precarious finances. He hadn't realized they would become evidence. Since we're all comparing accounts today, he said, returning with a folder, I have my own records to share. He placed his own document on the table. This is every dollar I've given you since I graduated. Loans never repaid, gifts, emergency funds, home repairs, all with dates and amounts. The total was highlighted at the bottom, $342,716.89. That doesn't count the non-financial support, he continued calmly. The countless hours I spent helping you navigate retirement options, negotiating with your medical providers, or the 26 weekends I spent repairing this house. He turned to Melanie. And this second page itemizes the startup capital I provided for your sister's boutique that mysteriously failed after 6 months. The one your parents convinced me to fund. Melanie paled. She and Audrey exchanged glances. What are you implying? His father demanded. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts, Rylan replied. But since we're discussing debts and what we owe each other, he pulled out another document from his folder. I have something else to share. He slid divorce papers across the table toward Melanie. You've been having an affair with Bradley Dawson for at least 7 months, he said quietly. Your charity meetings and work emergencies are poorly disguised excuses. I have evidence, which I'll be happy to share with the divorce attorney. The color drained from Melanie's face. How did you? That's not even the worst part, Rylan continued, cutting her off. The worst part is that all of you knew. He looked around the room. My own family knew my wife was cheating and said nothing. Instead, you plotted to extract money from me. His mother began to protest, but Rylan silenced her with a raised hand. I saw the texts, Mom. The ones where you told Melanie you understood why she needed more. The ones where Dad suggested she secure her future before making any moves. Audrey looked at the floor, confirming her complicity with her silence. I thought family meant loyalty, Rylan said, standing. I was wrong, but I've learned my lesson now. He walked to the door, then turned back. I'll be in touch about collecting what's owed to me. And don't worry, I'll make sure each of you pays your fair share. The threat hung in the air as he walked out, leaving a stunned silence behind him. Chapter 3. Depths of Betrayal. Rylan's hands trembled on the steering wheel as he drove away from his parents' house. The divorce papers sat on the passenger seat where Melanie should have been. She had refused to leave with him, her face a mask of cold fury and calculation. You've made a huge mistake, she'd hissed as he prepared to leave. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Those words echoed in his mind as he pulled into the parking lot of the Lakeside Motel, a nondescript establishment on the outskirts of town. He'd prepared for this day, securing a temporary residence far from prying eyes. The room was paid for in cash under a different name. Inside the sparse motel room, Rylan unpacked the essentials he'd secretly moved over the past week. Clothes, toiletries, and most importantly, a laptop with secured backups of all his evidence. The confrontation had gone as expected, but he knew it was just the opening salvo in what would become a war. He powered up his laptop and accessed the encrypted folder labeled Insurance. Subfolders contain meticulous documentation of every betrayal: Melanie's affair, his parents' financial exploitation, and the conspiracy between them. 2 months ago, subtle inconsistencies in Melanie's behavior had triggered his suspicions. A private investigator had confirmed the affair with Bradley Dawson, a hedge fund manager Melanie had met through her father. But it was the accidental discovery of emails between Melanie and his parents that had truly devastated him. From melanie.foster@meridianmail.com to beverlyf58@connectmail.com subject. Ryland's business troubles. Agree he's been holding back. The temporary cash flow issues at Foster Security are just excuses. I've seen the books. He's hiding assets. Bradley says we should pressure him now before he can move anything offshore. Your idea about the repayment is perfect timing. Ryland had built his security business protecting others from threats. Now he would use those same skills to protect himself and exact justice. His phone rang, displaying his friend Vincent Galloway's number. Vincent was the only person Ryland had confided in about his suspicions. "It's done," Ryland said when he answered. "How bad was it?" Vincent asked. "Worse than I imagined. They were all in on it, even Audrey. They've been planning this for months." "Jesus. What's your next move?" "I've already started," Ryland replied. "Remember that security system I installed in my parents' house last Christmas? It recorded everything. I have their conspiracy on video." Vincent whistled. "That's cold, man. Effective, but cold." "They taught me an important lesson today about family," Ryland said grimly. "Now I'm going to teach them one about consequences." After hanging up, Ryland opened his notebook and began mapping out the connections between the conspirators. Melanie and Bradley were obvious targets. His parents would face their own reckoning. But there were others: Melanie's parents, who had facilitated the introduction of Bradley; Audrey, who had betrayed him despite years of financial support; even Bradley's wife, Sophia, who apparently knew about the affair. Each name would receive attention tailored to their specific betrayal. His phone buzzed with texts from his parents, alternating between threats and attempts at reconciliation. "You're making a terrible mistake. That documentation won't hold up legally. Dad, please come back so we can discuss this rationally. We only want what's best for everyone." "Mom." Ryland silenced his phone and continued planning. The element of surprise was temporarily his, but they would regroup quickly. Melanie had access to her father's legal team. His parents would try to damage his reputation within the extended family. Time was critical. The next morning, Ryland rose early. Instead of heading to his office, he drove to a coffee shop 3 towns over and connected to their Wi-Fi through a secure VPN. From there, he sent a series of carefully crafted emails. The first went to his company's board of directors, explaining that he would be taking a 3-week leave of absence for personal reasons. His COO, Maya Hartwell, would handle day-to-day operations. Maya was fiercely loyal and, more importantly, disliked Melanie intensely. The second email went to his attorney, Desmond Walsh, requesting an urgent meeting and attaching evidence of Melanie's infidelity. Desmond had handled his business contracts for years and was both ruthless and discreet. The third was to a private security firm in the neighboring state, colleagues he'd worked with before. They specialized in surveillance and digital intelligence. He would need their expertise. By noon, Ryland had secured a temporary office at a co-working space registered under Vincent's company name. Using cash and prepaid cards, he established the infrastructure needed for his plan. Every digital footprint was carefully obscured, every communication encrypted. As he worked, his phone continued to buzz with increasingly desperate messages. Melanie had apparently returned home to find her access to their joint accounts restricted, the first concrete consequence of her betrayal. "What have you done?" "I can't access any of our accounts. This is illegal." "Melanie." Ryland allowed himself a grim smile. He'd moved most of their joint assets to secure accounts days ago, leaving only the minimum legally required. It wasn't illegal. It was prudent asset protection pending divorce proceedings. At 3 p.m., he met with Desmond Walsh in a private meeting room at the lawyer's office. "This is quite a situation," Desmond said after reviewing the evidence. The affair gives you leverage, but the financial conspiracy is more complicated. Your parents can't legally bill you for raising you. That's absurd, but the money you've given them becomes murky. Some could be construed as gifts, others as loans without proper documentation. I'm less concerned with recovering the money than ensuring justice, Rylan replied. They conspired to extort me while enabling my wife's infidelity. I want them to face consequences proportional to their betrayal. Desmond studied him carefully. What exactly are you planning, Rylan? Nothing illegal, he assured the attorney. Just a series of revelations that will force each of them to confront the true cost of their actions. Think of it as a lesson in accountability. As Rylan drove back to his motel that evening, he received a call from a blocked number. He answered cautiously. Hello, Rylan. This is Bradley Dawson. The voice was smooth, confident. I think we should talk like reasonable men about this situation. I have nothing to say to you, Rylan replied coldly. That's unfortunate, Bradley said, because I have quite a bit to say about Foster Security's government contracts. Sensitive information tends to become public during messy divorces. That would be a shame for your company's reputation. The threat was clear. Bradley was attempting to leverage Rylan's business vulnerabilities against him. Threaten me again, Rylan said quietly, and you'll discover exactly what a security expert is capable of. Your offshore accounts in the Caymans might interest the IRS, for instance. A pause. You're bluffing. Account number 852947733. Opened 3 years ago with an initial deposit of $1.7 million. Money that somehow never appeared on your tax returns. The silence on the other end confirmed Rylan had hit his mark. He discovered the account while investigating Bradley's finances, a standard procedure when evaluating a potential threat. This isn't over, Bradley finally said before hanging up. Rylan knew the threat was real. The wolves were circling, testing his defenses. But they had made a critical error in their calculation. They thought they were dealing with Rylan Foster, the dutiful son and devoted husband. That man had died at his parents' house the previous day. In his place was someone they hadn't met before. Someone who had spent years protecting digital fortresses from the world's most sophisticated attackers. Someone who understood that the best defense was a devastating offense. Someone who would show no mercy to those who had shown him none. Chapter 4. The Architect of Ruin. 3 days after the disastrous family meeting, Rylan sat in his temporary office reviewing the latest intelligence from his network of operatives. The picture emerging was even darker than he'd imagined. The affair between Melanie and Bradley Dawson hadn't begun 7 months ago, as he'd initially discovered. It had been ongoing for nearly 2 years. What's more, Bradley wasn't the only one. Before him, there had been a brief entanglement with Caleb Richardson, one of Rylan's business associates. More disturbing was the extent of his family's involvement. Text messages recovered from Melanie's cloud backup, accessed through credentials she'd carelessly saved on a shared tablet, revealed his mother had actively helped Melanie conceal the affairs, even providing alibis when needed. Of course, I'll tell him you're shopping with me. He never questions what we do on our girl days. Mom. His father had been advising Bradley on how to approach potential investors using proprietary information from Foster Security, information Melanie had quietly gathered from Rylan's home office. The betrayal ran deeper than mere infidelity or financial greed. They had systematically undermined his business while presenting loving faces. The duplicity was breathtaking. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Vincent entered, carrying takeout from their favorite Thai restaurant. Eat something, Vincent said, placing containers on the desk. You look like hell. I'm fine, Rylan replied, though he couldn't remember his last proper meal. Any word from Audrey? Vincent asked, opening containers of pad thai and green curry. Rylan shook his head. Of all the betrayals, his sister's complicity stung particularly sharply. They'd been close as children, united against their parents' manipulations. But the evidence showed she'd been feeding information to Melanie for months, reporting on Rylan's business struggles in exchange for shopping sprees. She texted to say she didn't know how bad it was and wants to explain. Classic damage control. Rylan picked at the food without interest. She knew exactly what she was doing. Vincent studied his friend with concern. Are you sure you want to go through with this? You could just divorce Melanie, cut ties with your family, and start fresh somewhere else. Ryland's expression hardened. They didn't just betray me, Vince. They try to destroy me. If I walk away, they'll do this to someone else. Actions have consequences. The plan Ryland had developed was comprehensive, targeting each betrayer's specific vulnerabilities. For his parents, who valued their social standing above all, he would expose their decades of financial manipulation to their church community and friends. For Melanie and Bradley, who prized their professional reputations, different approaches were needed. That afternoon, Ryland met with Sophia Dawson, Bradley's wife, at a quiet cafe 30 miles from town. Sophia was a poised woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Thank you for meeting me," Ryland said after they'd ordered coffee. "Your message was intriguing," she replied coolly. "Evidence concerning my husband that would benefit us both is quite the teaser." Ryland slid a folder across the table. "Bradley and my wife have been having an affair for approximately 2 years. This contains photographic evidence, hotel receipts, and text messages confirming the timeline." Sophia barely glanced at the folder. "I've known about the affair for 18 months, Mr. Foster. Bradley isn't as clever as he thinks." This wasn't the reaction Ryland had expected. "You knew? And you've done nothing?" She smiled thinly. "I've been doing quite a lot, actually. I've been documenting Bradley's financial misdeeds while he's been distracted by your wife. The offshore accounts, the client funds he's misappropriated." She tapped the folder. "But your evidence helps establish a timeline that benefits my case." Ryland reassessed the woman before him. "You're planning to divorce him." "Next month," Sophia confirmed, "after I've secured irrefutable evidence of his financial crimes. The prenuptial agreement has an infidelity clause, but it also has a criminal activity clause. The latter is much more lucrative for me." "Then perhaps we can help each other," Ryland suggested, leaning forward. "I have access to digital records that might interest you. In return, I need information about Melanie's communications with Bradley regarding my business." They spoke for nearly 2 hours, developing a mutually beneficial arrangement. Sophia had been gathering evidence against Bradley for over a year, motivated by his numerous infidelities and financial betrayals. She was methodical, patient, and utterly merciless, qualities Ryland recognized in himself. By the time they parted, Ryland had gained a powerful ally and valuable intelligence. Bradley had been using information about Foster Securities' client list and security protocols to attract investors to a competing venture. The information had come directly from Melanie, who had photographed confidential documents in Ryland's home office. That evening, Ryland received an unexpected visitor at his motel room. Audrey stood outside his door, her eyes red from crying. "Please," she said when he opened the door. "Just 5 minutes." Against his better judgment, he let her in. She looked around the sparse room with visible distress. "You're living here? Ryland, this is insane. Come home. We can work this out." "There's nothing to work out," he replied, keeping his distance. "You chose your side. It wasn't like that." Audrey protested. "Mom and Dad said they just wanted to talk about retirement planning with you. I didn't know about the bill until that day." "But you knew about Melanie's affair," Ryland countered. "You helped cover for her. The shopping trips where she was actually meeting Bradley. You're her alibi." Audrey's face crumpled. She said it was just a fling, that it wasn't serious. "I thought it would blow over, and you'd never have to know. And the information you gave her about my business struggles, was it also to protect me?" His sister looked away, unable to meet his eyes. She said she needed to know how bad things were, so she could plan accordingly. "I didn't realize she was feeding information to Bradley." Ryland studied his sister, looking for signs of deception. There was genuine remorse in her expression, but also fear, not just of his anger, but of something else. "They sent you, didn't they?" he realized suddenly. "To find out what I'm planning." Audrey's silence was confirmation enough. "Tell them they'll find out soon enough," Ryland said, moving toward the door. "Now leave." "They're saying you've had a breakdown," Audrey blurted out. "Dad's talking about power of attorney, claiming you're not mentally competent. They're building a case, Ree." The news should have shocked him, but somehow it didn't. Of course they would try to paint him as unstable, It was the most direct way to gain control of his assets. "Thank you for the warning," he said, his voice softening slightly. "But you need to choose a side now, Audrey. For real this time." After she left, Rylan made a series of urgent calls. If his parents were building a case to declare him incompetent, he needed to accelerate his timeline. First, he contacted Dr. Eleanor Winters, a respected psychiatrist who had consulted for his company on employee wellness programs. He scheduled an immediate evaluation to establish his mental competence with an independent expert. Next, he called Desmond to warn him about the potential legal maneuver. "I need affidavits from business associates confirming my rational behavior and decision-making capacity," he explained. "And I want to transfer primary business control to Maya temporarily, with specific limitations that protect my interests." Finally, he contacted the private investigators monitoring his parents and Melanie. "I need everything you have now, whether it's complete or not. We're moving up the timetable." That night, as Rylan reviewed the preliminary reports, a deeper pattern emerged. His parents' financial emergencies over the years showed suspicious timing. They always seemed to occur when his business was doing particularly well. The amounts they requested had gradually increased, testing how much he would give without question. More disturbing was evidence that his father had attempted to access his business accounts multiple times using personal information only a family member would know. The attempts had failed due to Foster Security's robust authentication protocols, but the intent was clear. They hadn't just been exploiting his success, they'd been actively trying to take control of it. As dawn broke, Rylan finalized the first phase of his counterattack. By noon, it would begin. By evening, the carefully constructed facades would start to crumble. He sent a text to Vincent. "It starts today. No turning back now." The reply came immediately. "I've got your back." All the way, Rylan looked around the motel room that had been his sanctuary for the past few days. It was time to move to more secure accommodations. The war was about to escalate, and he needed to be prepared for their retaliation. Because they would retaliate. Of that, he was certain. They would fight to protect their lives with everything they had. But Rylan had one advantage they didn't. He had nothing left to lose. Chapter 5. Scorched Earth. At precisely 9 a.m., Rylan's counteroffensive began with a series of strategically timed digital bombs. The first struck his parents' social circle. An email was sent to every member of their church congregation, neighborhood association, and social clubs. It contained records of his parents' systematic financial exploitation of their son, alongside evidence of their complicity in Melanie's infidelity. Their years of presenting themselves as moral pillars of the community were demolished in seconds. The second target was Bradley Dawson's professional reputation. Selected clients of his investment firm received documentation showing how Bradley had used confidential information obtained through Melanie to gain unfair advantages. No explicit allegations of illegality, just enough evidence to raise serious ethical questions. The third strike was aimed at Melanie's carefully cultivated social image. Her marketing colleagues, friends, and family received evidence of her affair along with snippets of messages revealing her true opinions about them. The catty remarks and mockery she'd shared with Bradley in their private communications. By noon, Rylan's phone was inundated with messages from shocked recipients. He ignored them all, focusing instead on the next phase. At his temporary command center, now relocated to Vincent's lake house 20 miles outside town, Rylan monitored the fallout through social media and informants strategically positioned in his target social circles. Reports coming in, Vincent said, reviewing messages on his tablet. "Your parents are getting calls from everyone they know. Your mother left church in tears this morning when people started questioning her. Your father is apparently making threats about lawsuits for defamation." The emails contained only verifiable facts, Rylan replied calmly. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Melanie's boss called her into an emergency meeting, Vincent continued. Apparently, that Preston account she claimed to be working on belongs to Bradley's firm. There are concerns about conflicts of interest and information sharing. Rylan nodded. And Bradley. Complete chaos at Dawson Investments. 3 major clients have demanded emergency audits. Sophia's timing was perfect, She filed for divorce an hour ago, citing financial misconduct and infidelity. The synchronized assault had caught them all off guard, just as Rylan had planned. While they were reeling from the initial revelations, he would deliver the second wave. At 3 p.m., Rylan met with the board of directors at Foster Security Solutions. Despite his planned leave of absence, this meeting was essential to protect the company from potential fallout. I apologize for calling this emergency session, he began once everyone was seated in the conference room. But I need to address a serious security breach affecting our company. The concerned faces around the table reflected the board's alarm. Foster Security's reputation was built on their ability to protect clients' sensitive information. Confidential client data and proprietary security protocols have been compromised, Rylan continued. Not through a technical vulnerability, but through a trusted insider, my wife, Melanie Foster. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as Rylan presented evidence of Melanie's systematic theft of company information. Documents photographed, client lists copied, security assessments shared with Bradley Dawson. I've already begun legal proceedings against the responsible parties, he assured them. But I wanted you to hear this directly from me, along with our mitigation strategy. For the next hour, Rylan detailed the steps being taken to secure client data and rebuild trust. By the end of the presentation, the initial shock had transformed into unified resolve to protect the company. We stand with you, Rylan, said Gabriela Santos, the longest-serving board member, both professionally and personally. The support was gratifying but not surprising. Unlike his family, Rylan had built genuine relationships with his colleagues based on mutual respect and shared values. As the meeting concluded, Rylan's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Desmond Walsh. Your parents' attorney contacted me, Desmond reported. They're threatening a harassment lawsuit and claiming emotional distress. They also mentioned pursuing guardianship due to your erratic behavior and potential mental break. As expected, Rylan replied. Forward them Dr. Winter's comprehensive psychological evaluation from yesterday, confirming my mental competence. Also, remind them that truth is not harassment, and their own actions caused any distress they're experiencing. Already done, Desmond confirmed. Your father also demanded access to your financial records to assess what you owe them. I informed him that no court would enforce their ridiculous bill for raising you. And Melanie? Her attorney is more sophisticated. They're focusing on your vindictive disclosure of private communications rather than denying the affair. They're positioning you as an obsessive husband lashing out at an unhappy wife. Rylan had anticipated this approach. Send them the recordings of Melanie discussing how to extract maximum assets during the divorce. The ones where she explicitly states the affairs were part of her exit strategy. Desmond chuckled appreciatively. That should reset the negotiation parameters. By evening, the initial chaos had settled into entrenched battle lines. Rylan returned to Vincent's lake house to monitor developments and prepare for the inevitable counterattacks. Vincent handed him a glass of whiskey as they reviewed the day's events. Your parents are holed up at home, not answering calls. Neighbors report multiple cars in the driveway. Family members coming to strategize, most likely. And Melanie moved in with her parents. She was seen leaving your house with suitcases around noon. Vincent hesitated. She didn't leave alone. Bradley? No. Audrey. The news landed like a physical blow. Despite everything, Rylan had held out hope that his sister might eventually choose loyalty over betrayal. Her decision to align with Melanie eliminated that possibility. At least the lines are clearly drawn now, Rylan said, masking his pain with pragmatism. That night, as Vincent slept, Rylan sat on the dock overlooking the lake, contemplating the path ahead. The first day of his counteroffensive had gone largely as planned, but this was just the beginning. His opponents would regroup, adapt their strategy, and strike back with increased desperation. His phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. You made a serious mistake. Everyone has secrets, Rylan. Even you. Bradley. The threat was predictable but concerning. Bradley was right. Everyone had secrets. The question was whether Bradley had uncovered any of Rylan's. A second message arrived, This one from Melanie. You think you've won? This is just getting started. Hope you're ready to lose everything you've built. Rylan considered blocking them, but decided against it. Their messages revealed their mental state and potential next moves. He typed a single response to both. I didn't start this war. I'm just better at fighting it. The following morning brought news that Melanie had been placed on administrative leave from Meridian Marketing pending an investigation into professional misconduct. Bradley's firm had announced an internal audit to assure clients of their commitment to ethical practices. Rylan's parents faced their own challenges. 3 long-standing dinner invitations had been withdrawn. Their church pastor had requested a meeting to discuss concerning allegations. The carefully cultivated social status they valued above all else was crumbling. But as predicted, they were fighting back. A carefully worded statement had been sent to their social circle, portraying Rylan as a troubled son who had suffered a breakdown after business setbacks. They expressed deep concern for his mental health and asked for prayers during this difficult family crisis. It was a clever attempt to reframe the narrative, positioning themselves as victims of their son's instability rather than perpetrators of a calculated betrayal. Rylan had expected this and prepared his countermove. He released a professionally produced video statement to the same recipients, appearing calm, articulate, and entirely rational. The contrast between his measured presentation and his parents' desperate allegations was stark. In the video, he provided context for the financial documents already shared. I believe in transparency, he stated, which is why I'm providing complete records of every financial interaction with my parents over the past decade. This includes the substantial support I've provided and their recent demand for payment for my childhood expenses. The evidence was devastating in its comprehensiveness. Bank transfers, text messages requesting money, thank you notes for loans never repaid, and finally, the itemized bill presented at the family meeting. By noon, public opinion had shifted decisively. While some friends still supported his parents out of loyalty, most were appalled by the documented exploitation. Your father's trying a new angle, Vincent reported after speaking with a mutual acquaintance. He's telling people you doctored those documents, that they never asked for money for raising you. The video recording of the family meeting should address that claim, Rylan replied. The hidden security cameras he'd installed during his parents' home renovation had captured the entire confrontation in high definition, including the presentation of the bill and Melanie's shocking alliance with his parents. The recording was his nuclear option, devastating but potentially traumatic for all involved. He had extracted key screenshots as evidence, but hadn't yet released the full video. Are you going to release it? Vincent asked. Rylan considered the question carefully. Not yet. It's leverage for now. They know it exists. That afternoon, Rylan received an unexpected message from Sophia Dawson. Federal regulators just arrived at Bradley's office with warrants. Your information combined with mine was enough to trigger an investigation. Thought you'd want to know. This development exceeded Rylan's expectations. While he had hoped to damage Bradley's professional reputation, a federal investigation suggested financial improprieties far beyond what he had uncovered. Thank you for the update, he replied. Any collateral impact on Melanie? Sophia's response was immediate. Investigators took her phone and laptop as evidence. She's being questioned about her role in obtaining confidential business information. Not technically under arrest, but definitely in trouble. The news brought Rylan no joy, only a sense of justice slowly unfolding. He had not involved federal authorities directly. That line would have crossed his ethical boundaries. But he couldn't deny satisfaction that the consequences of their actions were manifesting through legitimate legal channels. As evening approached, Rylan prepared for the next phase of his plan. The initial exposure had created the necessary pressure. Now it was time to exploit the cracks appearing in the alliance against him. His opponents had made one critical miscalculation. They assumed he would follow traditional paths of divorce proceedings and family disputes. Instead, he had approached their betrayal as he would any security threat, with comprehensive intelligence gathering, strategic pressure points, and escalating countermeasures. They had expected an emotional response. What they got was a meticulously planned campaign, and it was only just beginning. Chapter 6. Divide and Conquer. 5 days into the conflict, fractures began appearing in the alliance against Rylan. The pressure he had applied was producing exactly the results he'd anticipated. Mutual recriminations and self-preservation instincts were turning former conspirators against each other. Ryland's monitoring systems captured a heated phone call between his father and Bradley Dawson, with Russell Foster demanding to know why federal investigators had questioned him about Bradley's investment operations. "You said this was just a family matter," Russell shouted. "Now we got government agents asking about offshore accounts and investment strategies. What the hell have you dragged us into?" Bradley's response was equally hostile. "Don't try to play innocent. You were happy enough to take my money when I invested in your business opportunity. Did you think that wouldn't come up in an investigation?" The revelation confirmed Ryland's suspicions about his father's mysterious investment properties that had appeared 2 years ago. Bradley had been laundering money through Russell's real estate ventures, a connection Ryland hadn't fully established until now. Meanwhile, Melanie and his mother were having their own falling out. After initially offering support when Melanie moved out of the foster home, Beverly had become increasingly distant as social consequences mounted. Church friends were avoiding her, community organizations were requesting her resignation from leadership positions, and the whispers at the grocery store had become unbearable. "You assured me Ryland would back down," Beverly complained during a tense lunch captured by one of Ryland's operatives. "Instead, he's systematically destroying our reputation. This isn't what we agreed to." "Don't blame me for your son's vindictiveness," Melanie snapped back. "You're the ones who pushed too hard with that ridiculous bill. If you had stuck to the plan, gradually increasing financial requests like we discussed, none of this would have happened." The most significant development came from an unexpected source. Audrey reached out to Vincent, requesting a secret meeting with Ryland. "She seems scared," Vincent reported. "Says she has information you need to hear." Ryland was skeptical. "It could be a trap." "Maybe," Vincent acknowledged. "But she specifically mentioned something about what they're planning next and said it's worse than anything so far." After careful consideration, Ryland agreed to meet Audrey at a neutral location, a public park 40 miles from town. He arrived 2 hours early to secure the area and establish counter-surveillance measures. Audrey appeared at the designated time, alone and visibly nervous. Her usual polished appearance had given way to hastily applied makeup and rumpled clothing. "Thank you for coming," she said as they sat on a bench overlooking a duck pond. "I know you have no reason to trust me." "You're right," Ryland replied coolly. "I don't." Audrey flinched at his tone, but continued. "I've left Melanie's place. I can't be part of this anymore." "Part of what exactly?" She looked around anxiously before lowering her voice. "They're planning to destroy Foster security. Not just damage it, completely dismantle it." Ryland kept his expression neutral despite the alarm bells ringing internally. "Explain." "Bradley's been working with someone inside your company, someone high up. They're planning to release manipulated security protocols to make it look like your systems have critical vulnerabilities. They'll send this to your biggest clients simultaneously. When? Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Audrey pulled out a USB drive. "This contains everything I've overheard and copied from Melanie's notes. Names, dates, the specific vulnerabilities they're targeting." Ryland accepted the drive cautiously. "Why are you telling me this?" Audrey's composure cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Because this goes too far. They're not just trying to hurt you anymore. They'll destroy the livelihoods of everyone who works for you. 200 innocent people would lose their jobs because of a family dispute." Her distress seemed genuine, but Ryland had been fooled before. "What changed, Audrey? You stood with them against me just days ago." "I never wanted any of this," she insisted. "When Mom and Dad first talked about asking you for retirement money, it seemed reasonable. When Melanie mentioned her unhappiness, I sympathized. But it kept escalating. Demands became schemes, then conspiracies." She wiped her eyes. "The bill for raising you was the breaking point for me. I didn't know about it until that day, and I was too shocked to speak up." Ryland studied his sister carefully. "And now? Why turn against them so completely?" "I found out what Bradley did to his previous business partner," she whispered. The man committed suicide after Bradley destroyed his reputation with fabricated evidence. They're laughing about doing the same to Yuri. They're actually planning how to push you over the edge. The revelation sent ice through Ryland's veins. Not because he feared such an outcome. His mental resilience was far stronger than they realized, but because it revealed the true depth of their malice. "I need time to verify this information," he said finally. "If it checks out, we'll talk again." Audrey nodded, standing to leave. "I'm staying at the Pinewood Motel off Highway 16. Room 23. I know it doesn't mean much now, but I'm sorry, Ryland. I should have stood by you from the beginning." After Audrey left, Ryland immediately contacted Maya Hartwell at Foster Security. Without revealing the source, he warned her about a potential insider threat targeting their security protocols. "Lock down all access to our vulnerability documentation," he instructed. "Implement emergency authentication protocols for all senior staff. And Maya, trust no one until I get there." Within hours, Ryland had verified the core of Audrey's warning. The USB drive contained emails between Bradley and Carl Wilson, Foster Security's head of client relations. Carl had been with the company for 5 years, brought in during a period of rapid expansion. His access to both security protocols and client communications made him the perfect inside man. The planned attack was sophisticated and potentially devastating. Falsified security assessments showing critical vulnerabilities in Foster Security's protection systems would be sent to major clients from Carl's legitimate email account. Simultaneously, Bradley's associates in the financial sector would raise concerns about Foster Security's stability, triggering a crisis of confidence that could destroy the company's reputation overnight. By midnight, Ryland had developed a 3-part response. First, Maya would quietly revoke Carl's system access while he was unsuspecting. Second, all clients would receive a preemptive security update directly from Ryland, warning about a sophisticated social engineering attack targeting cybersecurity firms across the industry. The update would advise disregarding any security alerts not verified through their dedicated security channels. Third, and most decisively, Ryland would confront Carl personally with evidence of his betrayal, not to punish him, but to flip him as an asset against Bradley. At 7 a.m. the next morning, Ryland waited in Carl's favorite coffee shop. When the betrayer arrived for his usual pre-work Americano, he found his boss sitting calmly at a corner table. "Carl," Ryland greeted him. "Join me. We need to talk about Bradley Dawson." The color drained from Carl's face. "I don't know what you're—" "Please," Ryland interrupted. "Let's not waste time. I have the emails, the manipulated security protocols, and the distribution list for your planned 9 a.m. attack." He gestured to the chair opposite him. "The only question is whether you'll face federal charges for corporate espionage or help me bring down the people who put you up to this." Carl sank into the chair, defeat evident in his posture. "They have leverage over me," he said quietly. "Financial mistakes from my past. Bradley found out and threatened to expose me unless I helped him." "I know about the gambling debts," Ryland replied. "I've always known. I hired you anyway because your skills outweighed your history. You could have come to me, Carl." Shame flashed across Carl's face. "What happens now?" "Now you make a choice," Ryland said, sliding a folder across the table. "Option 1. You resign immediately, face potential criminal charges, and never work in cybersecurity again. Option 2. You help me execute a counter-operation against Bradley and his associates." "What kind of counter-operation?" Ryland allowed himself a small smile. "We're going to give Bradley exactly what he wants, just not in the way he expects." By 8:30 a.m., the trap was set. With Carl's cooperation, a modified version of the security alert would indeed go out to Foster Security's clients, but with a critical twist. Instead of highlighting fabricated vulnerabilities, it would include tracking code that would record exactly who accessed it and when, creating an evidence trail leading directly back to Bradley and his associates. Additionally, the document contains subtle security tests disguised as vulnerabilities. Anyone attempting to exploit these false weaknesses would trigger silent alarms and capture forensic evidence of the attack. At precisely 9 a.m., as Bradley's operation launched, Ryland and his team watched the trap close. Within minutes, Attempts to exploit the fake vulnerabilities began from IP addresses associated with Bradley's firm and several offshore entities. "We've got them," Maya confirmed, monitoring the incoming data. Multiple attack vectors, all documented and time-stamped. Meanwhile, Vincent was positioned near Bradley's office, ready to record the moment federal agents arrived, which they did by 10:15 a.m., having received an anonymous package containing evidence of corporate espionage, financial fraud, and conspiracy. By noon, Ryland had received confirmation that Bradley Dawson was in federal custody. Carl Wilson had provided a full statement to authorities in exchange for immunity, detailing how Bradley had orchestrated the attack on Foster Security through blackmail and bribery. The news sent shockwaves through the remaining conspirators. Melanie called Ryland repeatedly, each voicemail more desperate than the last. "You need to tell them I had nothing to do with Bradley's business dealings," she pleaded in her final message. "This is going too far, Ryland. People are saying I could be charged as an accomplice." His parents retreated into silence, no longer making public accusations or legal threats. According to neighbors, they hadn't left their house in 2 days. That evening, Ryland visited Audrey at the Pinewood Motel. Her information had proven accurate and valuable. "Bradley's been arrested," he informed her as they sat in her modest room. "The attack on Foster Security was prevented." Relief washed over Audrey's face. "Thank God. Your warning made a difference," Ryland acknowledged. "I appreciate that." "What happens now?" she asked hesitantly. "That depends," Ryland replied. "I'm still processing multiple betrayals from people I trusted completely. Trust isn't easily rebuilt." "I understand," Audrey said softly. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm done with their schemes. Whatever happens next, I won't stand with them again." Ryland nodded, not quite ready to offer reconciliation, but willing to acknowledge her choice. "Actions matter more than words, Audrey. We'll see where yours lead." As he drove back to Vincent's lake house, Ryland reviewed the state of play. Bradley was in custody facing serious federal charges. Melanie was increasingly isolated, her professional reputation in tatters and her lover unavailable. His parents were hiding from public view, their social standing destroyed. The conspirators who had tried to destroy him were now scattered and defensive, each fighting for individual survival rather than collective victory. Yet Ryland felt no satisfaction in their suffering. The victories had been necessary but hollow, painful reminders of how thoroughly he had been betrayed by those he loved most. The next phase would be the most difficult, not because his opponents remained dangerous, but because it would require him to decide what kind of man he wanted to be in the aftermath of betrayal. Would he pursue complete destruction of his enemies? Or was there another path, one that exacted justice while preserving his own humanity? The question followed him into uneasy dreams that night, haunted by faces he had once trusted completely. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. Day 9 of what Vincent had started calling the Foster War began with an unexpected development. Russell and Beverly Foster requested a meeting with their son through Desmond Walsh, Ryland's attorney. "They're claiming they want to resolve the situation amicably," Desmond reported during their morning briefing call. "No attorneys present, just family." "It's a trap," Vincent said immediately. "They're desperate and cornered." Ryland considered the request thoughtfully. "What's their current position?" "Financially precarious," Desmond replied. "Their social standing is effectively destroyed. Bradley's arrest eliminated their primary financial backer. The IRS has opened an investigation into those investment properties based on tips they received." "Anonymous tips, I assume," Vincent commented with a meaningful glance at Ryland. "The evidence was already there," Ryland said quietly. "I simply directed attention to it." The fall of Bradley Dawson had created a cascade effect. Without his protection and financial support, the remaining conspirators were vulnerable on multiple fronts. Melanie had been questioned twice by federal investigators regarding her role in obtaining confidential business information. Russell and Beverly faced potential tax fraud charges related to undeclared income from Bradley's investments. "What do you think they want from this meeting?" Ryland asked Desmond. "Mercy," the attorney replied simply. "They're hoping family bonds might mitigate your response. They've lost the offensive and are now purely defensive. Rylan nodded. Set it up. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Neutral location of your choosing. After disconnecting, Vincent looked at his friend skeptically. You're actually going to meet them? After everything they've done? I need to see them face to face, Rylan replied, to understand if there's anything genuine left behind the masks they've worn. The meeting was arranged at a private conference room in Desmond's law offices. Rylan arrived early, ensuring the room was prepared according to his specifications, including discrete recording devices and a security team monitoring remotely. Russell and Beverly arrived precisely on time, looking significantly diminished from the confident accusers of 9 days earlier. Russell's normally imposing posture was stooped, his face haggard. Beverly had abandoned her careful makeup and designer clothes for a plain sweater and minimal cosmetics. They sat across from Rylan at the polished conference table, the physical distance between them symbolizing the emotional chasm. Thank you for meeting us, Russell began, his authoritative tone replaced by something almost supplicating. We want to find a way forward that works for everyone. A way forward, Rylan repeated evenly. 9 days ago, you presented me with a bill for raising me. 8 days ago, you were claiming I was mentally unstable and attempting to gain control of my assets. 7 days ago, you were conspiring with Bradley Dawson to destroy my company. What exactly does a way forward mean to you now? Beverly flinched at the calm recitation of their actions. We made terrible mistakes, Rylan. We got caught up in greed and resentment. We're so sorry. Resentment. Rylan focused on the telling word. What exactly did you resent about me? His parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. Your success, Russell finally admitted. We struggled our entire lives, working jobs we hated to barely make ends meet. Then you, without any advantages or help from us, built this empire. It didn't seem fair. The raw truth was almost refreshing after years of manipulation. So you decided to punish me for succeeding? Rylan asked, to extract payment for the crime of building a better life than you had. It wasn't rational, Beverly said, tears forming. We're seeing that now. Bradley encouraged our worst instincts, convinced us we deserved a share of your success. Bradley encouraged, but you chose to act, Rylan corrected, just as you chose to support Melanie's infidelity rather than warn your son. Neither parent could meet his eyes at that. The betrayal was too fundamental to justify. What do you want from this meeting? Rylan asked directly. Russell cleared his throat. We want to know what it would take to end this. The federal investigation, the social exposure, all of it. Name your terms. My terms, Rylan repeated thoughtfully. You believe this is a negotiation? Everything has a price, Russell insisted, a flash of his old calculating self showing through. Just tell us what you want. Rylan studied his parents, truly seeing them perhaps for the first time, not as the authority figures of his childhood or the loving parents he had idealized, but as deeply flawed, selfish people who had systematically exploited his loyalty. I want you to understand something fundamental, he said carefully. This isn't a situation you can buy your way out of. The federal investigations are beyond my control now. The evidence exists and authorities are following it where it leads. Beverly began sobbing quietly. What I can control is my own response, Rylan continued. I won't pursue additional avenues of exposure or investigation against you. I won't testify against you unless legally compelled. But I also won't intervene to protect you from the natural consequences of your actions. That's it, Russell asked incredulously. You won't actively destroy us further, but you won't help either? What did you expect? Rylan asked with genuine curiosity. That I would make the evidence disappear? That I would lie to federal investigators? That I would welcome you back into my life as if nothing happened? We're family, Beverly said weakly. Family forgives. Family doesn't exploit, Rylan countered. Family doesn't conspire to destroy. Family doesn't betray. You redefined our relationship when you chose to treat me as a resource rather than a son. I'm simply acknowledging the terms you established. The brutal clarity of his position left them speechless. For years, they had manipulated him through obligation and guilt. Those weapons were no longer effective. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss? Rylan asked, preparing to stand. Russell made one final attempt. What about financial support? We're facing significant legal expenses. The audacity of the request was almost impressive. I believe my account with you is settled, Rylan replied coldly. The invoice I presented showed a substantial balance in my favor. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Goodbye, Russell. Goodbye, Beverly. I wish you luck with your legal challenges. That's it, Beverly cried. After 36 years, that's how you end our relationship? I didn't end it, Rylan corrected her. You did, the moment you decided my value was purely financial. He left them sitting in the conference room, their diminished figures reflected in the polished table. There was no satisfaction in the encounter, only a hollow confirmation that his parents had never truly seen him as anything more than an investment that had finally matured. The following day brought a different confrontation. Melanie requested a private meeting to discuss divorce terms. She's desperate, Desmond advised. Her attorney withdrew representation yesterday after learning she had withheld information about her role in Bradley's schemes. Her parents are distancing themselves to protect their own social standing. I'll meet her, Rylan decided. One last conversation before we proceed through attorneys. They met at a quiet restaurant in a neighboring town, the kind of upscale establishment Melanie had always favored. She arrived impeccably dressed, as always, though the careful makeup couldn't quite conceal her exhaustion. Thank you for agreeing to see me, she began after they were seated in a private corner. I know you have every reason to refuse. Rylan simply nodded, waiting for her to continue. I want to propose a clean break, Melanie said, sliding a folder across the table. I'm waiving all claims to joint property and business assets. In return, I ask for a one-time settlement that will allow me to relocate and start over. Rylan reviewed the document with mild surprise. The proposed settlement was remarkably reasonable, far less than she might have claimed under normal circumstances. Why the generous terms? He asked directly. Melanie's carefully constructed facade cracked slightly. Because I need this to be over quickly. My reputation is destroyed in this town. My career is in tatters. Federal investigators are building a case against me for corporate espionage. Actions have consequences, Rylan observed. Don't lecture me, Melanie snapped, her composure slipping further. You've won, okay? You've systematically destroyed everyone who crossed you. Isn't that enough? Is that how you see this? Rylan asked quietly. That I've destroyed you all? What else would you call it? She gestured around frantically. Bradley's in jail. Your parents are social pariahs facing tax fraud charges. I've lost my job, my friends, and potentially my freedom. You unleashed a nuclear response to what should have been a simple divorce. The distortion of reality was breathtaking. A simple divorce, Rylan repeated. One preceded by 2 years of infidelity, theft of confidential business information, and conspiracy with my parents to extract maximum financial gain. That kind of simple divorce. Melanie had the grace to look momentarily ashamed. I made mistakes. No, Melanie. Mistakes are accidental. Your actions were calculated, sustained, and deliberate. Rylan closed the folder. I'll accept these terms with one addition. A comprehensive NDA preventing you from discussing Foster Security's business operations or clients in any capacity. Fine, she agreed quickly. Whatever you want. As they concluded their business, Melanie hesitated before leaving. For what it's worth, it wasn't all fake. In the beginning, I did love you. Rylan considered her words carefully. Perhaps you did, but love without loyalty is meaningless. After Melanie departed, Rylan remained at the table, reflecting on the emotional wasteland of the past 10 days. His marriage was ending. His relationship with his parents was severed. His trust in human connection had been profoundly damaged. Yet somehow, amid the wreckage, he felt a curious lightness. The conspirators who had sought to exploit and destroy him were facing justice, not through his vindictiveness, but through the natural consequences of their own actions. He had not become the monster they had tried to create. He had responded, rather than blind rage, revealing their true natures without compromising his own. That evening, Rylan met with Audrey at a small cafe near her motel. She had provided valuable intelligence throughout the conflict, gradually earning a measure of redemption through consistent action rather than empty promises. It's almost over, he told her. The legal processes will continue, but the active conflict is winding down. Audrey nodded. What happens to everyone now? Bradley will likely face significant prison time for financial crimes and corporate espionage. Melanie has agreed to divorce terms and plans to relocate. Our parents are facing tax investigations, but may avoid criminal charges if they cooperate fully. And us? Audrey asked hesitantly. Is there any way back from this for our relationship? Ryland considered the question seriously. I don't know, he answered honestly. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, but you've taken steps in the right direction. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was an acknowledgement that while some bridges had been burned beyond repair, others might eventually be reconstructed. Slowly, with careful engineering and new materials. As Ryland drove back to Vincent's lake house that night, he reflected on the path forward. Foster Security had weathered the storm, emerging with strengthened security protocols and a more loyal team. His personal finances were intact, his professional reputation enhanced by his handling of attempted corporate espionage. The emotional landscape was more complicated. The family he had known was gone, revealed as an illusion he had desperately wanted to believe. The wife he had loved had been a carefully constructed fiction, designed to extract maximum value from the relationship. Yet Ryland himself remained, battered but unbroken, wiser about human nature but not fundamentally changed in his capacity for connection. The betrayal had tested his character and found it solid, capable of strategic ruthlessness without sacrificing basic humanity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The legal proceedings against Bradley, Melanie, and his parents would continue for months. Rebuilding his personal life would take even longer. But for the first time since the family meeting that had shattered his world, Ryland felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Not because his enemies had been vanquished, they had, but because he had discovered his own resilience in the process. The price of loyalty had been high, but the lessons learned were invaluable. Some debts, he reflected, could never truly be repaid, but others could be settled with perfect clarity, allowing both parties to move forward unburdened by the weight of what was owed. Chapter 8. Aftermath and Rebirth. 3 months after the fateful family meeting, Ryland sat in his newly purchased lakefront home, reviewing the weekly update from his attorney. The ripple effects of what local business circles now called the Dawson collapse continued to spread through the community. Bradley Dawson had pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, and corporate espionage, receiving a 12-year sentence. His cooperation with authorities had implicated several co-conspirators, including 2 former employees of Foster Security who had been feeding him information even before Melanie's involvement. Melanie herself had avoided criminal charges through a cooperation agreement, but faced 5 years of probation and significant financial penalties. As agreed in their divorce settlement, she had relocated to Arizona, where she was reportedly working at her cousin's real estate firm, a dramatic fall from her prestigious marketing career. Russell and Beverly Foster had been less fortunate. The IRS investigation had uncovered years of financial improprieties beyond their connection to Bradley. They had ultimately settled with tax authorities for a substantial sum that forced the sale of their home and liquidation of their retirement accounts. According to Audrey, they had moved to a small apartment in Florida, their social aspirations permanently diminished. Foster Security Solutions had not only survived the attempted attack, but thrived in its aftermath. The company's decisive response to corporate espionage had impressed existing clients and attracted new ones seeking partners who could withstand sophisticated threats. The experience had also allowed Ryland to identify and remove disloyal elements within the organization, strengthening its core. Vincent entered the lakeside office carrying 2 cups of coffee. Quarterly reports came in, he announced, handing Ryland a tablet. We're up 17% from last year. The Davidson contract renewal came through with expanded services. Good news, Ryland acknowledged. Maya's leadership during my absence was exemplary. Speaking of Maya, Vincent said casually, She asked if you'll be attending the company barbecue next weekend. The team misses seeing you in person. Rylan hesitated. Since the crisis, he had mostly worked remotely, maintaining the company's direction while avoiding the social interactions that now felt fraught with potential betrayal. I should make an appearance, he conceded. 3 months is long enough to hide away. Vincent settled into the chair opposite Rylan's desk. It's not hiding if you're healing. The observation was perceptive. Rylan had indeed been healing, not just from specific betrayals, but from the realization that his entire understanding of family and loyalty had been built on false assumptions. How's the therapy going? Vincent asked. After the dust had settled, Rylan had begun weekly sessions with Dr. Eleanor Winters, the psychiatrist who had initially evaluated him. Not because he was unstable, as his parents had falsely claimed, but because he recognized the need to process the trauma constructively. Challenging, Rylan admitted. We're exploring why I was so vulnerable to exploitation. Apparently, my drive to succeed was partly fueled by a need to earn love that should have been unconditional. Heavy stuff, Vincent commented. Necessary stuff, Rylan corrected. I need to understand the patterns to avoid repeating them. The therapy had already yielded valuable insights. Rylan had recognized how his parents had conditioned him to equate financial support with love, creating a vulnerability that Melanie had later exploited. He was learning to distinguish between genuine connection and transactional relationships disguised as affection. Audrey called this morning. Rylan mentioned, changing the subject. She's been accepted to graduate school in Boston. Environmental science. After providing crucial intelligence during the conflict, Audrey had undertaken her own journey of reflection. Unlike their parents, she had acknowledged her role in the betrayal without qualification and worked consistently to rebuild trust through actions rather than promises. Are you helping with tuition? Vincent asked cautiously. No, Rylan replied firmly. That would reinstate the financial dependency that contributed to our dysfunctional family dynamics. She secured loans and scholarships on her own merit. That's surprisingly healthy, Vincent observed. I'm learning, Rylan said with a faint smile. Boundaries don't have to be weaponized warfare or complete estrangement. They can be healthy limits that allow authentic relationships to develop. Later that afternoon, Rylan drove into town for his weekly therapy session. As he navigated the familiar streets, he reflected on how much had changed since the day he'd received the text summoning him to that fateful family meeting. The external changes were obvious. New home, finalized divorce, restructured company. But the internal transformation was more profound. The man who had once prioritized family loyalty above all else now understood that true loyalty couldn't be demanded or purchased. It had to be earned through mutual respect and genuine care. Dr. Winters greeted him with her usual calm professionalism. How has the week been, Rylan? Productive, he replied, settling into the comfortable chair opposite hers. I've decided to attend the company event this weekend. That's significant progress, she observed. What changed? Rylan considered the question carefully. I realized I've been avoiding genuine connection because of what happened with my family and Melanie. But that's allowing their betrayal to dictate my future. And you're not willing to give them that power, Dr. Winters suggested. Exactly. They took enough. They don't get to take that too. They spent the hour discussing Rylan's evolving relationship with Audrey and his continuing process of disentangling his self-worth from financial success. Your parents conditioned you to view your value primarily through economic achievement, Dr. Winters noted. That's why their attempt to bill you for raising you was particularly traumatic. It reduced the parent-child relationship to a financial transaction, which was apparently how they always saw it, Rylan concluded. Perhaps, but their distorted perspective doesn't have to become yours. The insight resonated deeply. Throughout his life, Rylan had unconsciously accepted his parents' transactional view of relationships. His generosity had been partly motivated by a belief that financial support could purchase emotional security. Melanie had exploited that same vulnerability, offering affection conditionally based on the lifestyle he provided. I've been thinking about the company's charitable foundation, Rylan shared. We've always focused on technology education scholarships, but I'm considering expanding into community mental health resources. Dr. Winters nodded encouragingly. Using your experience to help others is often therapeutic. It's not entirely altruistic, Rylan admitted. If resources like that had been available when I was younger, perhaps I would have recognized the unhealthy patterns sooner. After the session, Rylan decided to walk through the downtown area rather than driving directly home. It was the first time he had casually explored the community since the crisis. Previously, such outings had felt vulnerable, potentially exposing him to gossip or confrontation. Today, however, the spring afternoon beckoned invitingly. He stopped at a local bookstore, browsing without purpose and enjoying the simple pleasure of discovering new titles. In the cafe section, he ordered coffee and settled at a corner table with a book on architectural design for waterfront properties. Rylan? Rylan Foster. He looked up to find Diana Mercer, a client from Silverleaf Investments, standing nearby with a surprised expression. Ms. Mercer, hello, he greeted her, rising politely. Please, call me Diana, she insisted. I hardly expected to run into you here. Mind if I join you for a moment? Rylan hesitated only briefly before gesturing to the empty chair. Not at all. Diana was in her early 40s, a successful portfolio manager known for her straightforward approach and analytical mind. Foster Security had protected Silverleaf Systems for 3 years. I've been meaning to reach out, she said as she settled across from him. Your team's handling of that attempted breach was impressive. Maya mentioned you were personally involved in the countermeasures. We take threats to our clients seriously, Rylan replied. Clearly, Diana studied him with professional curiosity. The business community has been buzzing about the whole situation. Bradley Dawson's fall has unveiled quite the web of financial misconduct. Rylan tensed slightly, preparing for intrusive questions about Melanie or his parents. Instead, Diana surprised him. I won't ask about the personal aspects, that's your business. But I am curious about how you maintain strategic focus during such a multifaceted crisis. From a professional standpoint, it was masterfully handled. The genuine respect in her tone was refreshing. Here was someone interested in his professional capabilities rather than salacious details. When personal and professional crises overlap, compartmentalization becomes essential, Rylan explained. I approached each threat systematically, prioritizing by potential impact and immediacy. Their conversation shifted to broader topics of business resilience and crisis management. Diana's insights were sharp and her questions thoughtful. For the first time in months, Rylan found himself engaged in a stimulating professional discussion that had nothing to do with his personal trauma. As their coffee cups emptied, Diana glanced at her watch. I should get going. I've got a client meeting in 30 minutes. Of course, Rylan said. It was good speaking with you. Diana hesitated briefly. I'm hosting a small gathering next weekend. Just a few colleagues discussing investment trends and cybersecurity over dinner. Nothing formal. Would you be interested in joining? Your perspective would be valuable. The invitation caught Rylan off guard. His immediate instinct was to decline, to retreat to the safety of his lakeside sanctuary. But Dr. Winter's words echoed in his mind. Refusing connection was allowing the betrayal to dictate his future. I'd like that, he found himself saying. Thank you for the invitation. After exchanging contact information, Diana departed, leaving Rylan with an unexpected sense of possibility. The interaction hadn't been colored by pity or morbid curiosity about his personal drama. It had been a normal, professional connection, the kind he had avoided for months. That evening, as Rylan sat on his dock watching the sunset paint the lake with golden light, his phone buzzed with a message from Audrey. Just got my final acceptance letter with scholarship details. It's really happening. Thank you for encouraging me to pursue this on my own. It means more than I can express. The simple text carried profound significance. Unlike their parents' manipulative communications, Audrey's message contained no requests, no subtle pressure, just genuine sharing of important news. Rylan typed his response carefully. Proud of you. Your determination is impressive. You've earned this opportunity. As he set the phone aside, Rylan reflected on the day's events, the therapy insights, the unexpected conversation with Diana, Audrey's news. For the first time since the betrayal, he had experienced a full day that felt genuinely forward-moving rather than reactive. The damage inflicted by his family and Melanie would always be part of his story. The trust issues and heightened vigilance would likely remain for years, but they were becoming scars rather than open wounds, markers of past injury rather than ongoing pain. Vincent joined him on the dock, handing him a glass of whiskey before settling into the adjacent chair. "Good session today?" he asked. "Productive," Ryland confirmed. And an unexpected development afterward. He described the encounter with Diana and the dinner invitation. Vincent smiled knowingly. "Professional networking, or something more?" "Strictly professional," Ryland stated firmly. "I'm nowhere near ready for anything else." "Fair enough," Vincent conceded. "But it's progress either way. Engaging with the world again." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. Stars began appearing, reflected in the still surface of the lake. "I've been thinking about what happens next," Ryland said eventually. "Beyond the legal proceedings and business operations. What kind of life I want to build from here." And Vincent prompted. "I don't want to be defined by what they did," Ryland said quietly. "The betrayal, the aftermath, it's part of my story, but not the whole story. There needs to be more." "There will be," Vincent assured him. "You're already building it." Later that night, Ryland stood on the balcony of his bedroom, looking out over the moonlit lake. The water stretched before him like a blank canvas, reflective, deep, and full of possibility. 3 months ago, he had believed his life was defined by the roles assigned to him. Dutiful son, providing husband, successful businessman. When those identities had been shattered by betrayal, he had initially felt utterly lost. Now he understood that those roles had always been external constructs, expectations imposed by others who saw him as a resource rather than a person. The painful stripping away of false relationships had actually revealed something valuable. His core self, resilient and unbroken. The man who had emerged from the crucible of betrayal was more discerning, more intentional in his connections. He valued authenticity over obligation, actions over promises, boundaries over blind loyalty. Ryland Foster was rebuilding, not the life that had been destroyed, but something more genuine. The foundation had been laid, and the structure was gradually taking shape. It would be different from what had come before, designed with hard-won wisdom rather than inherited expectations. And that, he reflected as he gazed at the stars reflected in the dark water, was perhaps the most meaningful revenge of all. Not the destruction of those who had betrayed him, but the creation of a life they could never touch or diminish again. Chapter 9. Justice Completed. 1 year to the day after the family meeting that had changed everything, Ryland Foster stood at the entrance to Meridian Park, watching families enjoy the early summer sunshine. Children raced across green lawns while parents chatted on benches, their ordinary happiness a reminder of life's simple pleasures. Today marked both an ending and a beginning. The final resolution of legal proceedings against Bradley Dawson and Associates, and the official launch of the Foster Foundation for Family Mental Health. The timing was intentional, transforming the anniversary of betrayal into something constructive. Vincent approached from the parking lot, accompanied by Maya Hartwell and several other colleagues from Foster Security. They carried boxes of promotional materials for the Foundation's inaugural community event. "Everything's set up in the pavilion," Maya reported. "The counselors arrived early and they're ready for consultations. Media should be here within the hour." "Thank you," Ryland replied. "All of you, thank you for supporting this." The past year had brought profound changes, both professional and personal. Foster Security had expanded into 3 new states, its reputation enhanced by its handling of the corporate espionage attempt. Maya had been promoted to co-CEO, recognizing her exceptional leadership during the crisis. Ryland's personal transformation had been equally significant. Regular therapy with Dr. Winters had helped him process the trauma and develop healthier boundaries. He had rebuilt his social circle carefully, prioritizing authentic connections over obligatory relationships. Diana just texted, Vincent mentioned casually. "She's running about 15 minutes late, but will be here for the announcement." Rylan nodded, suppressing a smile. What had begun as professional networking with Diana Mercer had gradually evolved into something more personal. They had been dating cautiously for 4 months, both bringing past relationship scars to a connection built on mutual respect and transparent communication. As the team moved toward the pavilion, Rylan spotted a familiar figure sitting alone on a bench near the duck pond. Audrey. Home from her first year of graduate studies, she had asked to attend today's event, understanding its significance for her brother. Rylan approached, noting how different she looked from the fashionable but insecure young woman who had participated in their parents' schemes. Her hair was shorter, her clothing practical rather than trendy, her posture more confident. "You came," he said, sitting beside her. "I wouldn't miss it," Audrey replied. "The foundation is important. What you're doing matters." Their relationship had undergone careful reconstruction over the past year. Weekly video calls had gradually rebuilt a tentative trust, reinforced by Audrey's consistent honesty and her independent pursuit of education. "Have you heard from them?" Rylan asked, the question hanging between them without needing clarification. "Mom called last week," Audrey admitted. "Same as always, complaints about their apartment, hints about financial struggles, subtle guilt trips." "And how did you respond?" "I reminded her that my graduate program is demanding and changed the subject," Audrey said with a small smile. The boundary-setting techniques Dr. Winters recommended actually work. At Rylan's suggestion, Audrey had begun her own therapy 6 months earlier, working through the dysfunctional family dynamics that had shaped her choices. "They asked about you," she added. "I told them you were doing well professionally. Nothing personal." Rylan nodded appreciatively. They had agreed on this approach. Minimal information, no emotional details, no opportunities for manipulation. "They'll probably see the foundation announcement in the news," he noted. "Probably," Audrey agreed. "But that's public information. They're not entitled to anything more." As they sat watching the ducks glide across the pond, Rylan reflected on how completely his perspective had changed. A year ago, he had been consumed by the need to expose and punish his betrayers. The anger had been necessary then, a protective force that had prevented further exploitation. But justice had been served without requiring his continued emotional investment. Bradley remained in prison. Melanie had faded into obscurity in Arizona. His parents lived with the consequences of their choices in Florida, their social aspirations permanently diminished. The legal system and natural consequences had handled the punishment. Rylan's energy was better spent on rebuilding and creating something meaningful from the experience. "It's almost time for the announcement," Audrey reminded him gently. They walked together toward the pavilion, where a small stage had been set up for the foundation launch. Local mental health professionals, community leaders, and media representatives had gathered for the event. As Rylan stepped onto the stage, he caught Diana's eye in the audience. She had arrived just in time, slipping in beside Vincent with an encouraging smile. Beside her stood Dr. Winters, whose support had been instrumental in developing the Foundation's programs. "Good afternoon," Rylan began, his voice carrying across the attentive crowd. "Thank you all for coming to the official launch of the Foster Foundation for Family Mental Health." He paused, gathering his thoughts. This speech represented the culmination of a year's healing and reflection. "A year ago, I experienced a profound betrayal by those I trusted most. I won't detail that private pain today, except to say it revealed how destructive unhealthy family dynamics can be, especially when disguised as love." The audience listened with respectful attention, many aware of the public aspects of the Dawson case without knowing the full personal story. "That experience could have left me bitter and isolated," Rylan continued. "Instead, with professional help and support from true friends, it became the catalyst for something constructive. Our foundation will provide resources that were missing when I needed them most: accessible family counseling, education about healthy relationships, and support for those navigating family betrayal." He outlined the Foundation's 3 initial programs: subsidized counseling services for families in crisis, educational workshops about healthy boundaries, and support groups for survivors of family betrayal and exploitation. "We can't choose the families we're born into," Rylan concluded. But we can choose to break destructive patterns. We can choose to heal. And most importantly, we can choose to help others do the same. That's what today represents. Not just the end of a painful chapter, but the beginning of something genuinely healing. The announcement concluded with a ribbon cutting for the Foundation's mobile counseling unit, a converted bus that would bring mental health services to underserved communities. As photographers capture the moment, Ryland felt a sense of completion that no amount of revenge could have provided. After the formal proceedings, Ryland circulated among the attendees, discussing the Foundation's mission with community leaders and potential partners. Diana joined him for some of these conversations, her professional insights complementing his personal passion for the project. Later, as the event wound down, Ryland found a quiet moment with Dr. Winters. "So," she asked with professional curiosity, "how does it feel to transform the anniversary this way?" "Healing," Ryland admitted. "More satisfying than I expected." "Revenge provides temporary satisfaction," Dr. Winters observed. "Creation offers lasting fulfillment." "I still have moments of anger," Ryland acknowledged. "Flashbacks to the betrayal. But they're less frequent, less consuming." "That's normal," she assured him. "Healing isn't linear, and it doesn't mean forgetting. It means the experience no longer controls your choices." As twilight approached, the park gradually emptied of visitors. The Foundation team packed up remaining materials, high on the success of the launch. Vincent organized an impromptu celebration dinner at a nearby restaurant. "You'll join us?" Ryland asked Diana as they walked toward the parking lot. "I wouldn't miss it," she replied, squeezing his hand lightly. Their relationship had developed slowly, both aware of their respective trust issues. Diana's own divorce 3 years earlier had left similar scars. Different circumstances, but comparable lessons about betrayal and rebuilding. "Audrey's coming too," Ryland mentioned. "If that's uncomfortable." "It's fine," Diana assured him. "She's made consistent efforts to rebuild your relationship. That deserves recognition." At the restaurant, surrounded by colleagues who had become friends, Ryland experienced a moment of profound clarity. The people gathered around this table had proven their loyalty during the darkest period of his life. They had stood with him not out of obligation or expectation of gain, but out of genuine respect and care. This was what authentic connection looked like. Not the transactional relationships his parents had modeled, not the manipulative facade Melanie had constructed, but honest interactions between people who valued each other as individuals rather than resources. As wine was poured and conversations flowed, Vincent raised his glass. To the Foster Foundation, and to Ryland, who turned personal hell into public good. The toast was met with enthusiastic agreement. Maya added her own sentiment, and to lessons learned, especially that true loyalty can't be bought or demanded, only earned and freely given. The words resonated deeply with Ryland. The most valuable insight from the past year had been understanding the difference between obligatory loyalty based on titles like son or husband and authentic loyalty based on mutual respect and demonstrated character. Later that evening, after the dinner had concluded, Ryland and Diana walked along the riverfront path near the restaurant. The summer night was warm, the sky clear enough to see stars despite the city lights. "You seem different today," Diana observed. "More settled." Ryland considered her insight. The Foundation launch helped, transforming the anniversary into something constructive. "It's more than that," she pressed gently. "Something fundamental has shifted." She was right, as she often was about such matters. Today had marked the completion of a psychological journey, from victim to survivor to creator. "I realized something important today," Ryland explained. "For months after the betrayal, I was focused on justice, making sure they faced consequences for what they'd done. That was necessary then." Diana nodded encouragingly. "But today, looking at what we've built with the Foundation, I understood that true justice isn't just about consequences for wrongdoing. It's about restoration, not of what was lost, but of what should have been all along." "The Foundation," Diana suggested. "More broadly than that," Ryland clarified. "I've restored my ability to trust wisely, to connect authentically, to create rather than just react. That's the justice that matters most, reclaiming what they tried to destroy. Diana smiled, understanding the significance. Not just surviving, but thriving. Exactly. Rylan paused at a viewpoint overlooking the river, its surface reflecting the city lights. A year ago, I served my wife with divorce papers and confronted my family's betrayal. I thought that was the end of something. Now I see it was actually the beginning. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the river flow past. Rylan thought about the journey of the past year, the pain that had gradually transformed into wisdom, the betrayal that had ultimately led to more authentic connections, the ending that had become a necessary beginning. The price of loyalty had been high, but the lessons had been invaluable. He had learned to distinguish true loyalty from its counterfeit versions, to recognize the difference between love and exploitation, to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Most importantly, he had discovered that the ultimate revenge against those who had betrayed him wasn't their destruction, satisfying as that might have been temporarily, but his own reconstruction into someone stronger, wiser, and more discerning. Justice had been served, not just through legal consequences and social accountability, but through the restoration of what mattered most: his capacity to build a life of integrity, purpose, and genuine connection. As Rylan and Diana continued their walk along the riverfront, the anniversary that had once represented betrayal now symbolized something entirely different. The day he had begun the journey toward becoming the architect of his own life rather than a resource for others to exploit. That transformation was the truest form of justice, and it was finally complete. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.